I'm so sorry I'm not there in person. I'm sure everybody will know this difficulty of traveling at the moment and having to be in isolation, but very happy to be with you virtually. And I just wanted to start by saying thank you so much to Ranim Farsi, to Aya, to Arwa, to all the organisers of the Biennale, and congratulations obviously on the ongoing success. We see so many people pouring through the doors. It's really exciting to see such an incredible reaction from the community to such a world-class exhibition. So thank you. And lovely to be following, having been watching on the live stream, so many colleagues that we're working with and collaborating with together in Saudi. Let me share my presentation. You'll have to all let me know if this works. It's up on the screen. Great. So I just wanted to say a little bit today about what we're doing at Jameel in Saudi and around the world. We've just in the 75th year at the moment of Jameel philanthropy, which many of you will know through the work of Community Jameel as well as Art Jameel. Art Jameel itself has been going for more than 20 years, but we've just recently started to have our own installation in our own institutions for the first time, so really putting down kind of roots in terms of bricks and mortar. Art Jameel is very much rooted in this idea that the arts are absolutely fundamental to our lives and the way we live in today's world and to our understanding of the world. And also this idea that we have a right to make the arts as accessible as possible, that everybody should have access to the arts. Art Jameel is an independent, non-governmental, non-commercial organisation, and we spend a lot of time, particularly in Saudi these days, thinking through what can we offer alongside all the incredible initiatives that you've been hearing about the last 2 days, to make sure that we're always being as responsive as possible, plugging any gaps that exist there. And really our fundamental kind of building blocks are supporting artists through exhibitions, commissions, many other programs, and alongside that, really seeing education and learning as absolutely central. So the idea is really to open up our understanding of the arts, that the arts can be this prism to understanding, society at large, to building kind of discursive communities that are somehow then future-proofed for everything that we have coming at us these days. So we work mainly through 6 different areas: exhibitions, very obviously, with a particular kind of skew on looking at the Gulf, at the Arab world, at the global South, but then also opening up all these different exchanges and networks across the world. Our collection is fundamental to what we do. We again sort of focus a lot on artists from the Middle East and from South Asia, but we also collect through curatorial themes. So we'll think about themes like material heritage, for example, and look at artists from across the world that are engaging in these kinds of ideas. So therefore, again, creating these kinds of networks of thought and exchange rather than seeing artists as from a particular geography. And as I mentioned, learning is absolutely central to everything. We're starting to get more and more online and looking at what we can do in the digital space, for very obvious reasons, but we still believe very much in this kind of tangible people in a room exchanging ideas and really looking at what we can do outside of formal education. So what kind of informal educational networks can we produce through community schools, through workshops, through working with kids in schools and out of schools, all the way through to teens, young curators and artists. Commissions, again, as Mohammed Hafiz just pointed out, public art and commissions is, part of the deep history of Jeddah. But there's more and more space to kind of produce artists and artists' work that really impacts directly and exchanges directly with the audience in a city, with the passerby and the non-interested arts audience, as well as the usual suspects. We have an arts library in Dubai, and we're building a library in Jeddah that looks at cinema as well as the arts. And again, this kind of idea of libraries being active spaces, not silent spaces, but spaces for the community to come together to, develop research and deep research into the history of the Gulf, again, to try and sort of plug these gaps that are in desperately need of really adhering to looking at publishing in Arabic, looking at the history of Saudi and Gulf art histories, for example. And at the heart of this is obviously community, responsive kind of approaches to the community, asking what the community needs, and really trying to embed the arts right there in the city with the audiences, especially looking at youth. So yeah, as I mentioned, we worked for many, many years in this kind of agency model, working with third parties to try and deliver our aims. And just recently, over the past 5 years, we've built 2 institutions, really again trying to think of one international institution that can very much easily reach the world. Dubai is a very obvious city to build such an institution in. And then another institution in Jeddah that really looks at the needs of Jeddah as a city. So again, this kind of responsive theme is really thinking what's there already, what can we contribute that complements the likes of SAC, that complements everything happening in the government sphere, and really tries to plug these kinds of urgent gaps that appear through the arts scene. So hi Jameel, Jeddah, I'm sure some in the room have already been, but if you haven't, please come and see us soon. The idea is very much that this is a community hub that brings together artists, filmmakers, creative practitioners from all different disciplines into one place, and enables audiences that appreciate their work and new audiences that are coming to the arts for the first time to really engage. We really tried to pick up on this kind of history of Jeddah being a city that for millennia has been connected with the world, that has this kind of spirit at the heart of it being a port city that's one of exchange. We wanted to pick up on that, and also the history of multidisciplinarity in Saudi in general, and particularly in Jeddah, where artists or creatives of different sways will work across the different art forms and to bring together these different art forms in one space. We also saw during the building of Hi Jameel that we originally had a theatre in the space, but when cinemas opened up back up again, and we began to see that the cinema industry in Saudi was starting primarily with kind of the commercial cinemas in mind, we decided to turn that theatre into an independent cinema, the kind of picture house that can showcase Saudi films, that provides a community for young Saudi filmmakers to come together to practice their craft and to share work with each other, that shows films from across the Arab world, independent cinema from everywhere else, and really tries to really develop a kind of audio-visual culture of independence and artistic sway in Jeddah. Jameel Arts Centre in Dubai opened in 2018, so slightly older. It was planned after Hi, but it kind of moved very quickly in terms of the build, and ended up being open before Hi. Again, we kind of looked at the needs of Dubai as a city and thought, what can we do to really contribute to this scene? And of course, there's the commercial gallery scene there, there's the fair there in terms of the commercial side of the art world, but we were lacking a contemporary visual arts institution that really acted as a kind of museum anchor to the city. And again, our role is very much also about connecting with the world. And we're really, really proud that we've started now to already see exhibitions that are developed in Dubai, and now hopefully soon in Jeddah, begin to tour to other institutions around the world. So this idea of really thinking, instead of the Gulf as somewhere that can consume from the outside, instead to project from the inside out to the external world and really showcase these kind of very, research-driven, curatorially-led exhibitions that are totally steeped in local thinking, but have a kind of connection with the world and that draw in audiences from anywhere. So Hiwa K here in Dublin, for example, Hiwa is an Iraqi artist whose exhibition was curated by Art Jameel curators in Dubai, and it's now traveling to Ireland and then on to Canada afterwards. The same with these other exhibitions along the top, which are all international, and then our exhibitions in our 2 institutions here as well. This is just a snapshot of the last 6 months. Just moving on to Hi. I'm trying to keep an idea on the time, but I'll rely on the organisers to flag me if I'm going on for too long. But just to do a little bit of a deep dive in what we're hoping to achieve with Hi. As I mentioned, we just opened in the first week of December, so a very, very young institution. We're just getting going. And I really wanted to thank the community in Saudi for all the incredible support. Everyone from MOC, everyone from the Jeddah community, from across Saudi, for really joining with us and trying to propel forward this institution, and for the community and taking us to their hearts. I mean, we've been absolutely overwhelmed with visitors, which has been incredible. Capacity in the galleries every weekend. We've actually had to institute a one in, one out policy to make sure that we're not overcrowding the galleries, and just to see this great, kind of bubbling up of enthusiasm from visitors of all walks of life, all interests, or all depths of knowledge about art is something that's, truly heartwarming. And we know this is only the beginning, obviously. The Hayy, as I mentioned, is very much a kind of bespoke home for the arts. Every element of it is thought through in the context of Jeddah and the context of what we feel and what practitioners has come to saying, this is what we need. Multidisciplinarity, diversity is very much at the heart of it. A lot of that is brought by our residents, the tenants that are joining us, creative businesses and enterprises, mainly from Jeddah, including Atha Gallery, for example. So someone that's incredibly well known in the Saudi art context, but all the way through to a new baking academy, for example. So bringing together all kinds of creativity in its broadest sense under one roof. And then again, this idea of lifelong learning, thinking that the arts open up a space to talk about ideas, to talk about our lives today, how we want to live in the future. And they're not only about the process of making, it's about what exhibitions can spark, the kinds of conversations that we can have around those. In terms of Art Jamil's offering within Hayy, we very much focus on visual arts, which is, and Hayy Arts at the moment is the piece of the pie that's already been launched. Hayy Learning, as I mentioned, is this kind of community art school, which offers everything from weekend deep dives, for artists looking at subjects such as, how to write an artist statement, the nitty gritty of law around the arts, of copyright, of the sort of very much skills-based programming, through to the more kind of discursive debates around histories and ideas around exchange within the arts. And then branching out into, we've just run, for example, a year-long apprenticeship program for young curators from the Gulf, who did an online school and had practical knowledge as well. And then the next sections to come are Hayy Cinema, which I talked about already, which will open in a couple of months' time. And then lastly, our studio spaces. So again, this is taking the longest, the studios, because we really want to think through with local artists exactly what is needed. We're imagining at the moment this will be a mixture of maker spaces where people can really come and explore different techniques, through to residencies, international and local, and the provision of studios for workshops and ongoing types of learning. And then Hayy Community is really what draws it all together. And that's the section at which we really try to be very responsive to the audience's needs, as well as working with our residents as well. I just wanted to give an idea of the facade for anyone that hasn't seen it to date. I guess this is typical of the way that we want to work with artists in terms of joining them in taking experimental approach, taking risk together. This work started as a proposal from Nasser al-Mulham as a painting, and we worked with him to develop it into this kind of three-dimensional commission for the facade. And this is a program that's going to be repeated every year. So this will be here until August, and then we'll switch up into the 2022 commission, which can be anything from a text-based work to a photographic work. It's all about trying to sort of experiment with medium and to work with artists in a really kind of considered and intensive kind of way to produce new work with them. Just to give a little bit of an idea, I'm sure this is a rendering, I should really have a photo, but just to give an idea of once you've walked into Hayy, the kind of activity that you'll see. The Fina, for example, is a community space. It can be rented out by anyone. We're starting to plan that out to have farmers markets, for example, on weekends, pop-up exhibitions. It's fully kitted out as a kind of exhibition hall for very serious shows. The library, the cinema, the cinema library as well on the first floor, as well as the cinema taking up the ground and first floor on that side. And again, the way we want to work is so closely linked with the local community. The cinema, for example, the design of it, we opened up as an international competition, had architects from around the world apply. It was a totally blind process. Each architect just had a number, so none of us knew, include the jury as well as the organisers, who was who. And we were thrilled when the jury selected Bricklab, who obviously played a large role in designing the Diriyah Biennial as well. So, just showing that we perhaps sometimes underestimate the talent and kind of original thinking that is coming out of Saudi and how that can compete on the international stage. Just to spotlight a little bit what we're doing with High Arts. So High Arts is a 2-floor exhibition space. It's really our kind of community museum, but one where we really try to imagine it as an experimental space, a kind of laboratory of ideas, if you like. And we try to there put in place exhibitions there that spark a kind of conversation that really get people talking about art. So the opening exhibition staple, What's on Your Plate, is curated with Delphina Foundation, our partners in London, and it looks really at food and how we as humans relate to food, and investigates all the entanglements of food with memory and with ecology, with the future, with place, and really, this idea of Jeddah as a cosmopolitan city and Saudi as a kind of crossroads of millennia really kind of come together through this idea of artists working with food. The show includes Saudi artists from across the Gulf, this is a work by Asuncion Molinos Gordo, who's a Spanish artist. These are this incredible collective from Congo. These sculptures are made out of chocolate. And I think one of the most successful elements of this exhibition that we want to repeat with other exhibitions is this laboratory idea. So over 2 years ago, we started working with ecologists, scientists, artists, thinkers to imagine the exhibition, and we brought them together in this kind of cohort, if you like, that debated once a month, every month, what food means to us. And so they helped really develop the exhibition themselves, and through that practice supported each other. So every artist in the Gulf that was taking part in the exhibition had a kind of counterparts working elsewhere in the world, and they developed ideas back and forth in exchange. And we all know about the slow food movement. Well, we're trying a little bit to kind of, in a way, institute a kind of slow art movement. As Mohammed mentioned, this is a particularly unique moment in Saudi right now, one that we're all so privileged to be a part of. And thinking globally, there are and through history, there are very few moments like this when a scene really kind of re-explodes. It's obviously not something totally new in Saudi, but this kind of connection with the world and this sudden focus in which the grassroots is coming together with the government to really have this ground up and top down approach to the arts is something incredible. But one note of caution is that we're moving, and for necessity's sake, we're moving at an incredible speed. So we're trying to keep up with that speed while also trying to institute something of a kind of, counter force that slows people down, that really tries to put in place those kind of thinking skills, research skills, where we really try to debate with each other about what the art scene needs for the long term in a slower and kind of considered way, together with government colleagues, together with everyone working in the scene. One other commission that we did for the opening, which I guess was also trying to sort of really think about this moment being a reawakening rather than something that is new, which is sometimes how it's seen from the outside world, was a commission by Osama Asid, the photographer, working with this collodion wet plate technique. And he did a road trip around Saudi for around 6 weeks to different cities. And he's now completed around 55 portraits of Saudi artists, many of whom are from the older generation who've been carrying the scene for so long. And this is an ongoing project in which we want to try and document as many artists as we can. And a way that we work often in collaboration, obviously, with Nordiyad, as Ilaria was saying earlier, we've toured a series of artists' works, the Saudi artists mainly, that were involved in the Nouriyad Festival and exhibition curated earlier this year, which of course members of the curatorial committee for the Biennale were also involved with. And those, I guess, in a way of giving Jeddah audiences a chance to see some of this incredible activity that's going on in Riyadh, and to give those Saudi artists another airing. I'm aware that time is ticking, so I'm going to go very quickly through this section, which just highlights a little bit of what we're doing in Dubai. As I mentioned, the Dubai Centre is home to our library. It's also 3 floors of exhibition space. It's very much more of a museum dedicated to visual arts compared to our multidisciplinary centre in Jeddah. Just to focus on the library a little bit, because this is something that also spills over a lot into our work in Saudi. We now have a collection of around 4,800 books and documents looking at Middle Eastern, but particularly Gulf exhibition histories in English and Arabic, some in French and other languages too. And art books that are relevant to this region is how we've tried to position the library, and to build up a kind of research program that runs alongside. So this, for example, was a deep dive into 3 years of exchange between stage designers, theatre, poets and artists that took place in the kind of mid-80s in the UAE, just as an example of the kind of work that we do. This is another project that's happening at the moment by the Egyptian food researcher and historian Salma Seri, who's looking at traditions and decades of cooking and recipes in the Gulf. Our artist's garden is an example of the kind of radical collecting that we're getting into at Art Jameel, in which we're adding gardens that are created by artists to our collection. So this kind of idea of radical collecting is thinking we need to collect artists' works that document our history and show our pattern of thought. We also need to push our understanding of what can be collected. And through that pushing and challenging ourselves, it also leads back to us to question our own relationship with artists, the relationship between artists and nature, what it is to own something and what it is to open it up to the public. Quick idea of, these are some of the exhibitions that are on at Jameel Art Centre at the moment. Sita Abad, an incredible Filipino artist who's never been shown in the Middle East or South Asia at all. So, you know, again, kind of thinking, what are our networks? Who lives in our cities? How do we connect with the broader community and bring those kind of entanglement of histories between Asia and the Middle East and Africa together? And finally, just very quickly on international collaborations, Delphina Foundation in London is a very close collaborator of ours. We exchange ideas, we challenge each other, we coach each other, and we also enable artists from the Gulf to take up exhibitions, take up residencies in London, and we co-curated our shows together in the current show in Jeddah. The V&A was one of our first partners in London with the support from the Jameel family for the Islamic art program at the V&A. And the Jameel Prize is now in its 6th year. It's just finished its run in London and it's about to open in Chile for the first time. So touring to Latin America for the first time. And of course, for many people know that Ajlan Garem was the winner this year, the first winner we have from the Gulf. So again, when we work internationally, when we work locally, it's about what can we do at the grassroots level? How can we work with our collaborators to grow the scene? When we work internationally, it's about how can we showcase Middle Eastern artists, and particularly those from the Gulf, to an international audience and try and build that understanding. And likewise at the Met, the Jameel program at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York is about really thinking in depth about Middle Eastern arts histories and how to showcase them within the context of the Met, where Middle Eastern art has not had to date a really very high presence. And just thinking, you know, that the need to broker a conversation in a city like New York with an American public as well as an international public is something that really feels quite urgent quite now. So I think that's the end. I'm sorry if I talked very quickly. I should have taken a leaf out of Mohammed's book and also thought about how to make sure everyone can get in touch. But it's easy to find us on Instagram whether it's Hi Jameel or under the Art Jameel account as well. And please do get in touch. We particularly in Saudi want to reach out to artists via open calls, but obviously the learning programs are absolutely central to everything we're doing as well. And we're really trying to think about this idea of learning and engagement in the broadest possible way. So the program over the last month at Hi Jameel, for example, has included skills-based workshops such as darkroom techniques, a 3-day program of that with the summer a seed, through to beekeeping workshops. Bees are a part of the exhibition that's going on at the moment. So we did 3 weekend courses in beekeeping with Saudi beekeepers. Tonight, happening now, we have an opera recital. The American artist Laurie Anderson has come and given a talk. So it's this kind of balance of bringing in exciting practitioners working internationally, giving space to artists working locally, and really trying to think about the arts and the way that we can create connections with science, with community, with ideas in the broadest kind of possible way. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.